Yes, we shall now continue with Wagner. We remain with the Silver Leitmotifs and how they can be musically classified and analyzed. And I would advise one theoretical issue, namely this Leonard B. Meyer's explaining music, which has a very nice theory of melody. Namely, Meyer distinguishes among different types of melodies. Basically the scale melody, so it's a scale melody. Then arpeggiated triad, let's say Nibelungen, or so, based on the triad. Then there are axis melody, so you know the Brahms symphony movement, it's a melody turning around one note only. And so there are certain archetypes of melodies, and certainly this theory applies also to Wagnerian leitmotifs, I would say. And so I made a classification in which we have triadic motifs, so motifs that are based on just triads, and there are many like Rhinegold triad, or this Rhine River motif, and the Witter motif, the Thunder motif, and many others. And then among these triadic motifs we have 5 subclasses. One chord motif, there is only one chord there, let us say, Walküre call motif based on this augmented triad, for instance, or wait a minute, there are many. Well, that is Siegfried motif. Neighbor note motifs or appoggiatura motifs, Feuerzauber. So, Loge motif, this chromatic, and many others. Then series of third motifs, typical is the ring motif. So that is one of the most typical. Also the Ziegler motif is of that gold hair shaft, and other chromatic harmony motifs. Of course, among them the best known is this Schwesterliebe motif, which we have just one which is harmonically very exciting. Then we have the chord progression motifs, which are small narratives. It's the humming motif, and many others. Axis motif, Nibelungen were the warm motif, and many others. Gap and fill. Well, that's one interesting type, is gap and fill motifs. For instance, typical would be so there is a, and then many others like Siegmund's spring motif. It is the then gap which is then filled somehow. And then leap motifs which are based on back and forth figuration, like Siegfried's forging lead is typical, for instance, in the Siegfried, we have this. Yes, we have the. No, it is full of so many. Yes. For instance, Leitmotifs. And then we have the various combinations of the previous types, so that many motifs are just diatonic harmony, motifs with scale plus arbiturated triad plus something, chromatic scale plus symmetry, gap and fill and triad and scale, timbre and gap fill, let's say Walküre motif and many others. So I mean that musically we can find some kind of structure also there. Now let us go to the thing itself, like the tetralogy and how it goes. So there are 4 operas and the whole, all the protagonists of these operas, they belong to 3 different isotopies in my theory of myth. Namely, there are Valhalla gods, which are just belong to the nature. So there is Wotan, the supreme god, or Odin in the Icelandic mythology as one source of this figure. He is a spouse Frigga, and then goddess of the youth is Freya, who cultivates the apples, and by eating these apples the gods preserve eternally young. And then we have the Fro, young man who is god of the cheerful, joyful mind. And then Loge is the god of the fire, and also very cunning man, makes plots, intrigues, and is an advisor of Wotan. And then Donner, god of the thunder. So they belong all to this, we say isotopy. Well, isotopy, you don't need to worry, it stems from Parisian semiotics. It's just a level of meaning in this purpose, I would say. So it's one level are the gods. But then gods appear also as a society. They have a community, and we have another society which is competing. They are the Givihungs, which are some kind of gangsters or just negative figures. And there are the dwarf Alberich and Hagen, who is a very gloomy man sitting, watching and guarding things, and then sister and brother Gunther and Gudrune, who are in the Givihung court, some figures. And the third society are the Velsungas. So Velsungas are the most human-like characters, and in the first place Sigmund and Siegfried, we could say, who are brother and sister. So they are children of Wotan. Almost everyone here is a child of Wotan, by the way. And then their son Siegfried, who becomes maybe the main figure of the whole tetralogy, we could say. So we have these 3 competing societies, and somehow this saga idea is just in the fight and struggle, competition among these 3 societies. Then we have isotopy of nature or myth, and there are just these nature figures like Erda, who is goddess of the earth, who twice appears because she has the wisdom. She knows how everything goes. She knows everything, and that is why Wotan needs her prophecies to fulfill his own wishes. Erda. And then we have the Rhine daughters, Rhine maidens, or Rhine daughters, and then we have the Walküres, who are the woman figures flying in the air and carrying the fallen heroes to Valhalla, to the place of the dead heroes. And then we have Norns who are there are three. They are just they hold the thread of the word which has their destiny. They appear only at the beginning of Götterdämmerung. Then forest bird, who advises the way to Siegfried to the Fafner's cave in Siegfried, and then to the high up on the mountain to wake up Brunhilde. So we have the forest bird. They have their own motif. So we have this, and then of course all the gods, insofar they represent nature, like thunder, fire, and other elements, or earth or water. And the last one are is the fairy tale level isotopy. They are figures outside nature and society, like Siegfried, who is born outside any society as a l'enfant sauvage in forest, fostered by mime, and then the giants, Fasolt and Fafner, and then the dwarfs, the Nibelungs, who are just those nameless mass of creatures in Nibelheim, deep on the cave mine, forging the coal. They have no song of their own. They are only screaming there. So they are just, but Nibelungs, they are one element which is necessary in the total blood. So we have these three levels, and now when Rhinegold opens, of course, there is very picturesque cover picture of the Bühnen Festspiel in 3 Tage und einen Vorabend. So it is Vorabend, it is only in one act, this whole thing. And it opens in the bottom of the Rhine River, so we are in the very deep inside the water element. And by the way, Wagner always writes in the score quite exactly with the small letters what is seen on the stage and how the actors, what they do there and how they move there. So, and I think every authentic staging should follow necessarily this as much as possible, these Wagnerian advices how to behave on the stage. And as we know, we had hired for Bayreuth the ballet master Fricke just to teach the singers to move on stage naturally. Anyway, musically speaking, this is very important. The prelude lasts about 15 minutes, and there is only one chord. So it's a typical one chord motif and one basic note in E flat major. So it starts very deep orchestra with bass clarinets. There's nothing but this E flat. Then comes the fifth. It's something like filling the harmonics with the overtone series. So it's the birth of the word. In many mythologies, even in Oceania and Polynesia, like Gilbert Roger has studied this sound of horn, a tritone, is something linked with the beginning of the word and the creation of the word. So Wagner opens with this, and then we have only this. It starts a little bit to move. And then also the orchestra, it increases, there are more and more instruments joined there, and there is a crescendo, and it reaches first the song of the Rhine daughters. The human song appears, and there are these three Rhine daughters. They are just playing around the gold. There is the gold which is glittering there, and some ray of sun hits reaches the gold, and then it is just giving its golden splendor. And they enjoy this to have this gold in the deep in the nature, so to say. They sing only vaja, vaga, vagara, veja, so it's an onomatopoetic expressions which do not mean anything, though they are Våglinde, Välgunde and Flosshilde. So this is absolutely metaphorically important. So it is the happy initial state in which everyone is quite happy. And we can see that whole Nibelungen after all is the kind of metaphor of conflict between nature and culture, so to say. Gold represents the natural resources, which then the human beings, they intervene, they try to exploit these natural resources for their own purposes of power and other things. And that creates the big problem, and at the end it leads to the end of the whole world. So I think if we see this in its ecological light, the whole Nibelungen, it is extremely actual and fascinating and just in our time, I would say. Of course, in the Finno-Ugrian mythology, this principle of gold is a sampo. It's some kind of mythological thing which produces all the good things on the earth. So we have that in many mythologies. So we have this happy state, and musically the idea of how this one chord prelude or motif was then utilized. Other composers like Alexander Scriabin in his Vers la Flamme, Scriabin Prometheus chord. It is only one chord, very different from based on the fourth intervals, which is in their just floating there in the tonal space all the time. So it's the same idea which Wagner already had. Now anyway, Rhine daughters are there, but then comes the first other figure, maybe Alberich, who is one of the dwarfs, and Alberich looks enchanted the Rhine daughters and wants to seduce them somehow. But the Rhine daughters, they are rather mercilessly mocking and making just fun with Alberich and his clumsy appearance and his voice, which is also quite rough. And so they're just teasing Alberich, and Alberich cannot do anything. But then the Rhine daughters, they also see the goal, and then they tell the secret of the goal, which is that the one who renounces the love, refuses love, will be able to forge a ring of the gold, and the one who has the ring has a limitless power of the whole universe. So they reveal the secret, and this is we follow the musically. The first minor harmony already refers to this, namely. Des goldes slaf, so the sleep of the gold is sung when we have this first minor harmony in the whole. But then, of course, leitmotif ideas appear here, and the gold has its own motif. So that is the gold, which is glittering there, and they are singing just very happily of this gold. But then when they tell the secret of the gold, we have this so-called Entsagungs-motif, love renunciation motif. Narrative, it's the consecution of the triadic harmonies. But then Alberich gets quite angry, and then he decides that, well, I don't care about Rhine daughters, so I shall leave the love for other. And then instead I take the gold, which is, and so he by his forces, he climbs up at the gold and takes it and drops it and brings it away. And so Rhine daughters are left without gold, and they are quite upset, of course, and the whole stage gets darkens, and they so the initial crime is happened, and then we have the ring motif already there, although no ring has been yet done. And by the way, it is from here we then had an interesting stage change, namely we go from the bottom of the river very high on the top of the mountain at the Valhalla castle, which has been built by demand of Wotan by the giants Falk and Fafner as a symbol of his great power. And this music is quite impressive, I would say. Franz Liszt made one of his arrangements just of this yes, it's the only arrangement he did about Nibelungen ring, namely this. Takes other motifs. He takes the sword motif. So that portrays all this move to the Valhalla. What happens there is that in the plot that Wotan has promised as a salary to giants the Freya as their spouse, Freya the goddess of the eternal youth. And now Wotan is in sleep and he's quite happy, but then Fricka is quite worried that now the giants will come and they will take the Freya, but which is an idea which is absolutely opposed. Now then they had a talk, and then they have the idea that maybe giants will be satisfied with something else which is as valuable as Freya. Loge tells that there is this gold in the it's Alberich is now possessing, and perhaps if they give the gold to the giants, they might be satisfied. Anyway, then the giants appear, and of course that is also very their motif is very eloquent. So they are very clumsy. Wotan appears with his this scale motif. It is the motif of the contract which he has done with Fasolt and Fafner. Now, they are not satisfied with anything else but Freya, and then at the end they take by force Freya and go away. But then comes Loge to help with his intelligence Wotan, and Loge gets the idea that they must travel down to the Nibelheim to take the gold and ring from the Alberich. And Wotan, who now thinks that, well, I would also love to have the ring because I would love to have the power, he accepts. And so they go down, and there is once again this very orchestral ritornello, which is some kind of symphonic texture, as it is often used to be. And they go there, and Alberich, there we hear the Nibelungs, they are working. So we have this hammering rhythm, and by the way, we have here the real sound of the iron, so they are put in on stage, so it is some kind of musique concrète, some kind of use of noise already. Alberich is just subordinating all the Nibelung dwarfs who are forced to work endlessly and forging this gold. And there is another figure, Mime, which is younger brother of Alberich, which comes there, and Mime is also so to say, under Alberich's rude power. Alberich has made a Tarnhelm, which is the has its own motif. It is a kind of network which he puts on his head, and then he becomes invisible. And as an invisible, he can supervise everything, and he hits Mime, who doesn't know from which side this beating is coming. So that is the scene. Then come Wotan and Loge to this scene, and they start a dialogue with Alberich, and they first flatter him by saying that you seem to be quite a mighty man, you can do anything. Can you, for instance, make yourself like a dragon by magic? No, then Alberich does it by his Tarnhelm. But then Loge proposes, no, can you also make yourself so small that you cannot even be distinguished? Alberich says, yes, of course, and he makes himself a toad. But when he is in the form of toad, then Wotan and Loge, they capture him, take him as a prison, and then they go up. There they force Alberich to give them the gold, they promise that they will liberate, give the freedom Albrecht only if he gives all the gold. No, Albrecht says, yes, I shall do it because I will keep the ring. But then at the end, Wotan sees the ring in the hand of Albrecht and says that I want to have the ring. And so they take at the end the ring by force. And so Albrecht has now lost his power, and instead Wotan puts the ring in his hand. Then we move again up, quite up, back to Valhalla, and there again we have this this music is portraying the shift, and there in Valhalla gods have become quite old, grey, pale, because they have no apples which Freya has cultivated, and by eating the apples they were kept eternally young. So that's the situation. And then the giants come again, and then they are promised the gold, just the of the Nibelungs as compensation to replace Freya. Now at the end they accept the idea, but then they agree that they take as much gold as Freya can be covered by gold altogether, so that Freya is no longer seen at all. So then they gather the gold, and Freya seems to be totally covered. But Fafnir notices that there is it's Fasold. Notice that there is a tiny hole from which Freya's eye can be still seen. And then he notices that Wotan has the ring. If he puts the ring to that hole, then the last requirement is fulfilled. And now Wotan is in dilemma. What he prefers, the power of the whole world or Freya. In this phase appears Erda down from the earth. So Erda appears, and she tells that I know everything. Wie alles war, weiß ich. Wie alles wird, wie alles sein wird, sehe ich auch. So, how everything was, I know it. How everything will become, I know even that. And then he says that now Wotan, give up the ring, otherwise very bad things will follow to you if you don't give up it. So, at the end, Wotan decides that, well, he decides that Freya is more important because all the other gods are also supporting this wish by Fricka, and he gives the ring, but at the same time he has the vision of a future hero which will save the gods from the disaster, and by his own will, not by Wotan's will. And when he has this, then appears this symbol of the sword motif of Siegfried appears as early as here. In some stagings they put something like a sword already glittering on stage, but not in all. Now then immediately the curse of the ring appears, because now giants have given up the love, and so they start to quarrel about the gold, and then Fafnir kills Fasold and takes the gold alone and disappears. After this comes Donner, the god of thunder, and he makes the thunderstorm, lightnings, and they cause the rainbow, whereby the gods then step in procession to Valhalla. But this is by Louis Brassin has arranged this. So we have this motif, and then comes the thunder here. Then leads to the this Valhalla. So you're only one act. So that is the prologue to everything which happens. And then starts the next opera, the Walküre, which is the first night of the whole tetralogy. And now we can say that thinking of the composition techniques, Rhinegold is much more advanced than Tannhäuser Lohengrin because he is able to create this very flexible recitativo style, or which becomes a Sprechgesang, so speech song style later. And in the orchestration, it has quite special tonal color. Like every Wagnerian opera has a different timbre, different klang, different tone color, and even every separate scene has its difference. So obviously, orchestra was something very important, and as he said, the orchestra has a Sprechvermögen. Orchestra is able to tell about the things. And the theory of orchestra in the tragedy was such one that Friedrich Schiller said it already, that orchestra is the choir in the antique tragedy. So it's some kind of protagonist on stage which is commenting and reflecting what happens among the main figures. So that is the role of the orchestra. It is like the living wall, living wall between the audience and the stage. And Wagner adopts this role. He wants to avoid the real choirs altogether. He wants to eliminate them because he found them as a part of the French grand opera à la Meyerbeer, in which it's only part of the stage scenery, so something artificial and nothing coming out of the myth and spirit of the myth itself. Then the Walküre is considered perhaps one of the I don't say best, but one of the most refined of these operas. And here we have already we have 3 acts, and now the main figures are here, Siegmund and Siegfried. So we tell the prehistory of Siegmund. So Siegmund and Siegfried, the brother and sister, and then Hunding, who is the very rough husband of Siegfried, with whom she is married by force, not following her own will. And then we have Wotan, again appears, and his spouse Fricka, and then Brünnhilde. Brünnhilde, the main female figure, appears already in this opera. And then of course we have the Walküres. Well, their names are Gerhilde, Ortlinde, Waltraute, Schwertleite, Helmvige, Sigrune, Grimgerde, Prosweise. So there are 7 Walküres. Now, let us go to this opera, what happens there. The overture, again, was something important to Wagner because it was strongly the Christoph Willibald Gluck's Iphigenia in Aulis overture, which Wagner had reorchestrated in his Dresden years. So it is a kind of portrayal of the storm in the forest, because now we are in the old German forest around the hut of Hunding, and we hear stürmisch, stormy. It's very long, and it increases the, and then we have the rideau opens, and we have the inside the Hundehütte, and then Siegmund opens the door, enters. He's persecuted by the Hunding and his men simply, and he's quite tired, and he comes in, and he's a young hero, and he's taught müde. He's deadly tired and says nothing. Then he says, whose house this may be, here I must take a rest. And then Sieglinde appears from the inside of the house and notices the Siegmund lying there, and now starts a very nice, very intimate, almost chamber music-like dialogue and scene between Siegmund and Sieglinde, in which Wagner uses only separate instruments like cello, for instance, just to create the very intimate atmosphere. So this was some scene which even Igor Stravinsky accepted. Here we have just the pure sound of individual instruments, and then we hear Ziegler's motif is this. So he looks at the man and guesses who he might be, and then she brings her drink horn. Their glances meet each other, and they recognize each other secretly without knowing, so they are brother and sister. Schwesterliebe, sister love motif, which is then later used very much in all its symphonic. So it repeated. Somehow they are immediately into each other. We have a Velsunger motif. We have these both Velsunger family motif and Ziegler motif. They are just bound together. So it is very skillful. But then suddenly Hunding enters. That is Hunding's motif. Even before he sings anything, we can see his character by these rather abrupt chords. So he's there. And Hunding, they had dialogue, and he says that Siegmund can stay there overnight, but in the morning they must have a fight together. And then Hunding goes to sleep, but then Siegfried puts some sleeping thing in his potion drink, so that they can be certain that he will sleep very, very deeply. Then starts the night, and there is an ash tree. The Weltesche is just in the center of the house, and there is something which is pushed, namely there is the hand of a sword, which is of gold and which glimmers there secretly. So, and when it is noticed, we hear this. The sword motif, das Feuer bricht zusammen, so it is the fire from the fireplace which is giving its shimmer. And then they meet Siegmund and Sieglinde, and they fall in love with each other, and then they decide to escape from Hunding's hut, and suddenly outside the winter storm has changed into a spring, into beautiful spring green colors. And then Siegmund sings his spring song. That is not leitmotif, because this is heard only once. If you hear something only once, then it is not leitmotif. Leitmotif has to be repeated. To modulate. And then comes the sister love motif. it is very like a Volkslied. It is the folkish Volkslied style, we could say, and perhaps the best interpretation I can imagine, which I heard, is by this tenor Max Lorenz, who is singing it as early as in Berlin in 1926. We have one recording, and there the style is correct. It must be very light, like Schubert lead, nothing rough, nothing forte, but like a folk song as he sings it. Let's have now listen to it a little bit.
Wischen dem Wangenmut, in wildem Lichte leuchtet der Lenz, auf linden Lüften leicht und lieblich, wunderwebend sich wiegt, durch Wald und Dauer geht sein Atem, weit geöffnet lacht sein Aug, aus Silbervöglein Sangen haucht aus, seinem warmen Blut entblühen wonnige Blumen, Keim und Spross entspringt seiner Kraft. Mit zarter Waffe bezwingt die Welt, Wind und Sturm mischen der starke Wehr, und musste den tapferen streichen, strenge Tür aufweichen, die trotzige Stadt, uns
escape the forest. Then starts the next act. We are back again in Valhalla, and there Frikka is now quite upset that this has happened. Namely, the brother and sister are in love, so that is against their moral laws, and he says that now Wotan has to punish. At the beginning we hear the this motif of the anxiety, anxious feelings. Frikka says that Wotan has to punish, so that he must arrange that Siegmund falls down with the fight. Hunding will win, and Hunding can then win over Siegmund, and Wotan has to send his favorite Walküre Brynhilde to guarantee that this happens. Wotan quite unwillingly then has to do this, and so Brynhilde as well is not willing at all to do this job, but then at the end she has to do. And then we come to the quite central second act, fourth scene of the Walküre, and here we are in the forest among the mountains and rocks, and there Siegfried and Siegmund, they are escaping Hunding, who is persecuting them by his men and dogs, and then Siegfried sinks down quite tired and falls in deep sleep, and Siegmund is left there alone. And then starts this famous scene of the Todesverkündigung, in which the Brynhilde appears to Siegmund, and this is very long, about 25 minutes long scene, this dialogue between Siegmund and Brynhilde. I have studied this, made a very detailed formal analysis of this scene in my book, which I've shown you already, this semiotics of classical music. It's here in my Wagner session. And this study, if you, chapter 8, it is the Brynhilde's Choice, a journey into Wagnerian universe, follows the so-called Paris school of semiotics. So it is rather formal grammar which I use there to study this scene, but it is maybe one of my most advanced semiotic analysis of music. Also appeared in Finnish, by the way. In this study, I try to analyze the whole scene using some, I can just tell some part, otherwise the principle is rather complicated. You should study semiotics a little bit in order to understand it in a deeper sense, but it uses the so-called the semiotic square, where we have the four different contradictory and opposed elements, and in this case these fourth categories which are in square are life, death, and not life. So life, death, and then there are negations as not death, not life. This means that life is a life in which Siegmund and Siegfried live. Death is represented by Brynhilde, or rather the place where Brynhilde says she has to bring Siegmund after this battle. Namely, the fallen heroes are brought together to Valhalla. But then, what are not death and not life? Well, not death is certainly just the Valhalla, which is a very nice place. Brynhilde tries to persuade Siegmund to accept his fate, because it is the will of Wotan, whom he cannot oppose. by telling that this Valhalla is very nice. You meet your Valfather, your father, you meet their Wunschmädchen, the wish girls who will give you the nice things to drink, etc. So it's not at all unpleasant. So it is not death. And then not life, on the other hand, is the life for Siegmund without Sieglinde. Because at the end, Brynhild tells that you must go there alone. Sieglinde must remain on the earth. So then that such life is not life. And so we have this scheme, and then we can arrange the main tonalities of which appear, the keys in this long scene, according to this semantic square, namely that the tonalities of life are A major and F sharp major, whereas death is always E flat minor. And then the not death, the tonality of Valhalla is D flat major and B flat major, and the tonality of not life is D minor. So we have here this kind of semiotic square in which we have these elements. And then the scene, whole scene itself has been studied. I have so to say segmented or put it in smaller sections here, numbered them, and then portrayed each section according to their narrative function, according to their discourse type, whether it is declarative, meditative, prophesizing, ordering. Then it's formalization, in which I use the formal logics of grammar school, rather close, by the way, to the Anglo-analytic formal logics. And then I give a verbal interpretation what that all means. And so I have come through the whole scene with this study, in which the semiotic content, I mean the significations and the communication especially, are present or represented in this Wagnerian scene. But let us see, it starts with this. We have this motif, death motif. Let us see, it sounds immediately something rather like that death, something very, very austere at least. We have the, let's see, we might have a D minor tonic, and then we have here, A is lowered to A flat, or it is G sharp, and then we go suddenly to totally other tonality, C sharp, E sharp, G sharp, B. So he's combining two chords from very distant tonal keys, D minor to C sharp major, dominant seventh, to the F sharp major, or if you like, F sharp minor. Anyway, so F sharp major and D minor, they are combined, and that creates just a very special flavor of this special motif. So this kind of, you know, D minor, this is an enharmonic trick, namely the D minor, D, F, A, F is the same as E sharp. And so E sharp, then we get this enharmonically. Now this technique was used also other composers, like it was used in Russia, well, maybe by influence of Wagner and Berlioz, but for instance in Mussorgsky's Boris Gornov, we have the coronation scene of Boris, which is psychologically very complex, because Boris does not want to be crowned as a Tsar. But then we hear the bells of the Kremlin, we have the D major and A flat major. So that D major, F sharp is enharmonically same as D flat in A flat major. So he combines these two chords, so it is not, for instance, but it is just. So the same idea is here. this is so-called death motif, and it is very much used throughout the Nibelungen. Here it has quite clear connotation. So it is the Brünnhilde telling of the future death of Siegmund. But later it becomes just something like generally threatening atmosphere. So in Götterdämmerung it is just a part of the symphonic melos and network of the orchestra, and we don't remember exactly any longer its original primal meaning. But here it opens. Then it is. And then they go also go Stellgesang. But it interrupts here. So we have here 3 4-bar units. So 4, bar, 4, and then. But now we are waiting the 4th unit in this periodical structure. But it is we have here a fermata. It stops here. So Wagner cuts this normal 4-bar, 4-bar unit periodical structure, and lets the listener wait when the answer will be given. So he saves this 4th repetition to the dramatic climax later. Then it is repeated. Then start Brünnhilde appears, sehr feierlich und gemessen, with her horse. Horse is, I've never seen real on stage. They used real horses in Bayreuth, but horses can behave in an unpredictable manner, so they couldn't use. Anyway, it said so. And they don't say anything, they are only looking at each other, so it is quite mute. But then we have the Valhalla motif, and then Brünnhilde starts to talk. Siegmund, sieh auf mich. And then I'm the one whom you have to follow soon. Then Siegmund answers, wer bist du sagen, who is die so schön und ernst? Who are you, tell me, who is so beautiful but serious? Says, only those who will soon die see me, other people don't see me at all. And then she does tell that I'll bring you to the Wahlstatt. It has B major, so it's something very, very nice. But Siegmund starts to ask him and they have a dialogue, long dialogue, but then Siegmund asks him, will my sister follow there? And the answer is a decisive turn here. In E flat minor. No, she must breathe the air of the earth. Siegmund will not see there. And this makes the decision of Siegmund. Then I shall not follow you. Zu ihnen folg ich dir nicht. So he refuses definitely. And now starts the fight in dialogue between these 2 figures, and the music is now following the principle which has been called as a musical prose by Tannhäuser, the German musicologist. Prose, namely, it has very soon no longer clear phrases or periods, but the dramatic flow is so intensive. But often it ends when we wait some kind of after dominant, the tonic, we never get it, but we get a diminished seventh chord. Let's say here. What is here? So from diminished seventh chord, we can go in music, as you know, to whatsoever direction harmonically. And so it keeps the music go on. Then in this fight, in which Siegmund has his sword at hand, which he has, by the way, pulled from the, I forgot to tell, he pulled the sword from the ash tree in the Hunding's house. That's important there. But then he falls down at Sieglinde and wants to be only, so we have and then comes the decisive moment psychologically of the whole Wagner opera, namely, I call it Brynhilde's choice. Namely, Brynhilde looks him and she says, so little you respect the eternal will. Is that poor woman there who is so harmlessly lying on the earth at you, is that everything to you? But she does not say this mockingly or ironically, but erschüttert. She is upset because Brynhilde has lived all his life, her life in the women community of the Walküres. They have never seen this type of scene between man and woman with this love. So she's quite upset what she sees. And certainly here, I think she changes her mind. So we have this music. And now we have the here we have the fourth part of the periodic now in the climax. And they continue. Now Siegmund decides that, well, then I shall kill Sieglinde and the future Siegfried with my sword. If that is the only thing. And he takes the sword. At the last minute, Brynhilde grasps him strongly. No, you must live. You must both live. All you must live. I shall help you. I shall fight for you against Hunding. So, yes. So Brynhilde is just very jubilating that for the future victory. And we have immediately this. We come to F sharp major, the key of the life, and we come to cadence. And now we of course expect the tonic, A major, but we don't get, instead we have so instead we have this diminished seventh chord, which is very dramatic. So, and with the words when Brynhilde sings Schaff ich Segen und Sieg. With the word Sieg, victory, we hear this, which means that there will be no victory, but the music knows, or the orchestra knows that Siegmund will, however, lose the fight against Hunding. So here is just the very important Sprechvermögen of orchestra. So orchestra is the choir of the antique tragedy who is present there, and it knows more than the protagonists on the stage what will happen. So here are we have this multi-level narrativity, which is very exciting. And so it happens that, and by the way, this technique in which we don't get the tonic, but instead we have some kind of deceptive cadence, is the basis of the so-called musical prose of Marcel Proust. Musicology prosa, term used by Hermann Tannhäuser, German scholar, and it is very close to real prose, which later in literature, which become Wagnerian, like in case of Marcel Proust. So Marcel Proust uses the same techniques, but with purely verbal means. But I shall come to this later when I speak on the French Wagnerism. So anyway, then Brünnhilde leaves the stage and leaves Siegmund and Siegfried there alone, and then come Hunding with his men and dog and starts the fight. Brünnhilde is there fighting for Siegmund, but then appears Wotan suddenly and breaks the sword of Siegmund, the sword which has been pulled from the ash tree in the previous act, in the first act, and which is the sign of his heroic nature. So it is broken into pieces. And then Brünnhilde takes the pieces of the sword and Siegfried and escapes. And Wotan remains there on stage quite out of his mind, furious against Brünnhilde, who has not followed her role as her helper actor, we could say. Then comes the third act, which many people, Walküre, they only wait for this very famous, this Walküre and Rit, the Ride of the Walküres, which is one of the most popular pieces, much performed as a separate orchestra number in symphony concerts. And this was something very dramatic and very impressive in the 19th century music. In Parisian salons, Madame Cambremé said that if she listens to this, then she doesn't know any longer whether she should say good morning or good evening. It is so confusing, but galloping rhythm. So in fact this is not only very energetic, pure kinetic energy, but it is also topics. Maybe these topics of galloping horses was quite commonly used by Mozart and Haydn already in their symphonies, and Beethoven, like in his, for instance, E-flat major sonata. This galloping horses in Beethoven. So Beethoven knew this topical tradition and certainly utilized it just here to portray the Walküre. So we have I would like to show you here just one film fragment which is of this Walküre. There is the very famous Norwegian soprano Kirsten Flagstad appears in New York, I think maybe in the Metropolitan Opera House in a show. Speaker is famous cinema figure Bob Hope, and then appears Kirsten Flagstad and sings Brünnhilde's motifs and song, and that is a very authentic Wagnerian style. So it is the complete easiness, lightness, because there is enormous power behind that, but it is always, it looks very pleasant, nice, she's smiling, and that is how it had to be in Wagner's mind as well.
Artist as Madame Kirsten Flagstad, star of the Metropolitan Opera Company. Madame Flagstad has been acclaimed the world's greatest living soprano. She will sing an aria from Richard Wagner's opera, The Walküre, Brünnhilde's battle cry.
And there was total misunderstanding later of this scene because it was thought to be represent just the very chauvinist, patriarchal, aggressive Wagner style. But altogether what happens on stage is completely different. Namely, there are the seven Walküres, and Brynhild, they are bringing, they are giving shelter to Sieglinde and protecting her and bringing her with pieces of the sword on stage and trying to help her against the hatred of Wotan, who is approaching. But then at the end, all the other Walküres, they are scared, they leave, and Brynhild is left there alone with Sieglinde, and Wotan arrives, and he is quite out of his mind. But before he arrives, we have this prophetic scene in which we have a theme or melody which is given only twice in the whole Nibelungen. It is namely here, and then quite at the end of the Götterdämmerung, after the catastrophe, the end of the world, we have this motif of hope, so to say. And we have it in the scene, it's Brynhild that is prophesying the future Siegfried. And Sieglinde in größter Rührung, in highest emotion, thinks about the dearest wonder which will happen to her when Siegfried will, after all, be born. But here we have also one of the first times the Siegfried hero motif. As we know, Siegfried has separate motifs, whether he appears as a fairy tale hero, society hero, or the clans, or mythological hero. Anyway, here we have it. it is pure bel canto singing, we can say. And Wagner always in the highest climaxes, he uses bel canto. He was not at all against the Italian singing, albeit he of course tried to develop the German singing, but the bel canto was totally acceptable, always in Bayreuth, and there were people who thought that only those singers who had the bel canto training could sing these extremely heavy and difficult Wagner roles without damaging their voices. So that was the opinion by Reynaldo Hahn, not Wagnerian, but he was the director of Paris Opera later, who knew Lili Lehmann, one of these Wagner sopranos, original from Bayreuth, who had this bel canto basis and who was able to, even in 60 years age, to continue her career thanks to that. Otherwise, there was the fame that Wagner is so difficult that it will really destroy the voice of singer, and that started this rumor after premiere of Tristan, where the famous tenor Schnorr then surprisingly suddenly passed away only 3 weeks after the performance. Then it was said that it was because of Wagner, which was certainly not the reason. But anyway, we have the bel canto, and it appears here in this Siegfried song, and then at the end of the Götterdämmerung. Now, then comes very long scene. This extremely dramatic beginning calms down and starts the dialogue between Wotan and Brünnhilde, and Wotan wants to punish Brünnhilde for her disobedience, and says that he will put Brünnhilde to sleep on a rock, and so that any man who passes by can then take Brünnhilde as his spouse. The Brünnhilde is quite shocked to hear such a terrible fate, and then she only proposes modestly to Wotan that hero should be really something who doesn't feel any fear, no angst, no fear. And then they agree that Wotan will, by Loge's magic, create a circle of fire, magic fire circle around the rock, and so only the very brave man can traverse the magic fire. And so they agree, and then Loge is called, and we hear first here is a Louis Bassin arrangement for this Feuerzauber, the miracle of the fire. It opens with the Wotan's contract motif, which is a descending scale passage, and then we have these chords which indicate sleep. They go chromatically down. Then we have the fire idea by Loge. It is extremely colorful orchestral techniques which Wagner is here using. And then we have so-called Waberlobe, the rainbow motif, swinging motif, which closes the scene. But anyway, it starts. Sleep later becomes Wotan's Wagner motif. then it closes just with this vibrant sonority of the flames. So that is the end of the Walküre, in which, as we see, just the lyrical moments, more tranquil orchestral interludes, and then the vocal part and sometimes very melodious are just ideally combined to make a whole structure. Now comes the next, the second opera of the trilogy named Siegfried. Finally, the main hero enters the stage, and Siegfried is very long opera. It has 3 acts, and the main, but there are just 2 tenors on stage, namely Siegfried and Mime, the Nibelungen dwarf, who has taken the quite young Siegfried as a baby to foster and educate him, but with the egoistic motive that then the future Siegfried will reveal the goal, the goal, and forge the sword back again into a real sword. So 2 tenors, and then there are 3 bass roles, namely Wotan has now got a transformation. He's now their wanderer, the wanderer. He has lost his power, and the end of Valhalla is approaching. Gods are there helpless, and Wotan is just wandering around the world, looking for the future hero who would really, by his own will, rescue the gods. And then we have Alberich, who was the elder brother of Mime, who lost the ring, as we never, and then the giant Fafner, who now appears as a dragon. He has, by magic, made him a dragon figure, because now he has the gold, he has a ring, he has the Tannhäuser, the magical helmet to change make a metamorphosis. And then we have one alto, it's Erda, goddess of the earth. Erda appears again, and then of course Brynhilde, soprano. So there's Siegfried and Brynhilde, the main. And Schauplatz der Handlung, so the staging is, first one is in the mountainous hole in cave in the forest. Second is Tieferwald, is a very deep Germanic romantic forest. We have the so famous Waldweben section there. And then the third act is the Wilde Gegend am Fusse eines Felsenberges, so the wild area. And then we have the top of the mountain where is the so-called Brynhildes Stein, so the stone upon which Brynhild is living. So we have first scene with Mime and Siegfried. We have this Nibelungen motif, is just the Leitmotif of the Mime. There is Mime, and then comes Siegfried from the forest. Siegfried has grown up as a so-called l'enfant sauvage, so without parents, and Mime has taken him from Siegfried, who has died in forest. So Siegfried is left alone, and Siegfried is totally ignorant about his identity, who he is, who was his father, and even who was his mother. And he comes from the forest with the bear. No, we very seldom have any bear on stage, but that symbolizes, of course, his rather savage life. And so they have a dialogue, and there are stories are told again. They have to be told what has happened in previous operas, because maybe some spectator has come just in this opera to see the whole drama. And then Mime reveals that tries to he has a ballet that in which he tells how the just foster Siegfried as quite young. But then we have the motif is already referring to Welsungas and Siegfried's origin, although he doesn't know anything about that on the stage. Sister motif. So music is, so to say, weaving its plot behind what happens on stage. And it continues such a way that Wanderer Siegfried goes away, and Wanderer, it is Wotan, appears. He has a mask, he has a big hat, and he has his spear, long spear of course, and there starts the section of riddles. Now, a riddle is a special form of mythology, which means that there is someone is asking questions. It's a riddle, and then the other one must answer, and if he can answer, then he is worth or something. If not, then it's very bad to him. So the famous sea mythology is of course Oedipus and the Sphinx. So Sphinx is asking questions and Oedipus answers them. So here they Wanderer asks 3 questions, or Mime asks first 3 questions from Wanderer. He asked about what is the society who lives high on the mountains. Well, it is Valhalla, of course. What is the group living on Earth? They are the Welsunga. And who are the people living down in the cave? They are Nibelungen. But then, and always we hear the respective leitmotif making reference to that figure which is asked. And then comes the turn of Wanderer, and he also asks, and with the question we already hear in the music the answer. So we have the Valhalla motif of Walküngens Bönen die Götter, so that the answer is given even before. So and then they stay. In Siegfried funeral march is much used. Now then Siegfried returns, and he decides to, he becomes a smith. He wants to finally again forge this sword into a weapon, because Mime was unable to do this. And so there's at the end there is this working passage in which it is quite concretely portrayed, this process. We have this Siegfried motif is there, and then we have of course the sword is called Notung. It is forging motif, and then also very clear cadence. The music is somewhat archaic in the folkstreamy style, you could say. And then at the end, the process is over. This working motif, which is a very undefined character motif, and then it closes with a ready product in we are in. We have the. We have this sword motif there. It ends there. Second act. There is Nibelungs are in the forest. There's Aldeich appears again and has a dialogue with the Wanderer there, the ponder of the fate of the world. And then comes Siegfried with who in the forest, who is now there alone. We know Fafner's Stimme, Fafner's voice is on her. Fafner is now a dragon hiding somewhere deep in the forest. And then start this long nature mythical or lyrical section of where Siegfried is alone amidst this quite fabulous German forest. So here is this Waldeinsamkeit, loneliness of the forest, praised by German romantic poets like Eichendorff, for instance, of his Karl Kolan in Finland wrote a beautiful song. But anyway, we have this. We have this gradually starting in the orchestra, and in fact that is also portrayed in the this Louis Dassin version very finely, namely, yes, Siegfried is there and wondering who he is, who was his mother, how did she look like, and what will come, and we have forest bird. The forest bird appears then after Siegfried's sleep and tells the route way to Fafner's cave. We have the forest bird motif. It is expanded. this scene is one of the most beautiful in the whole Nibelungen, this section. And Siegfried hears the bird song and tries to understand. He thinks it is like talking something, has some message. And then he tries to make a small wood instrument horn by his own forces, and he just takes his sword and cuts twist over a tree and tries to make just wood instrument, blow instrument to blow. We hear the first time his one note. But this instrument does not sound at all. It's totally false. But this is very interesting passage which can be played as a separate number as well. And then suddenly comes the dolce, like some kind of remembrance from his unconscious, his hero motif. And then cheerfully and always faster and faster he's playing. But then this awakens Fafner in the cave. We hear the Fafner just awakening. And Fafner is singing what is there, who is wakening me? Are you too courageous? And Siegfried doesn't feel any fear, so now he's no longer has no sense of fear. So he's one sign of the hero, and then starts the dialogue. But then after all, because Fafner has the goal, and Fafner is just sleeping there and watching his goal and singing Hier liege ich und besitze. What it is. That is, here comes just the, I would say once again, the socialist Wagner. Fafner is a capitalist who only owns and enjoys just owning without giving anything to any other one. He has a gold, he has a ring, and he is just sleeping there and wants to keep there. So that is very very ironic if you want to have that type of more political interpretation. And then Siegfried, after all, has a fight with Fafner, and then he kills the Fafner with his sword. And then after it, he wants to understand the bird song, but by mistake, some blood of the dragon has fallen upon him, and when he touches by his lips this blood, he suddenly becomes comprehensible to understand the bird song. And so the Vogelstimme, the bird voice, tells him that he must go now to the mountain, to the rock, and the Brynhilde is waiting for him there, and he must awaken that. So this passage from the Nibelungen myths is very deeply rooted in German culture. There are many other interpretations. One of the best known is the movie by Fritz Lang from 1920s. So there is one study of the Richard Wagner, Fritz Lang, and the Nibelungen, the dramaturgy of this vowel, which is just telling this movie and its vision. And perhaps we could have a look how Siegfried is just visually portrayed in this mute film. So we have the scene with Siegfried and dragon. Mime appears again, and Mime has only very cunning intentions. So he wants to get from Siegfried the gold, and so there starts a quarrel, and then Siegfried also kills Mime as the reason. So Siegfried behaves really quite like quite savage person. So, and then ends the second act, and then comes the third act. Now we must remember here was 10 years interval pause in the composing, and in the meantime Wagner wrote Tristan and Mastersingers, and certainly the whole style changed a little bit. The orchestration is now different, heavier, and so the whole thing is somewhat, and we can hear some distant traces of Tristan chromaticism and also from Mastersingers harmonies. There is a prelude to third act which wonderfully combines different leitmotifs representing just these four mythological elements, namely the water, the air, and the fire. We have namely in the bass line it is just the water element, and then we have so we have water and the air, we have the Walküre and it. And then comes this other motives, namely of course we have the final, we have the sleeping moment. These are all superimposed, so it's very, very impressive scene altogether. So then again Wanderer appears and meets Siegfried, and Wanderer tries to prevent Siegfried from proceeding, but Siegfried does not respect this wanderer, this old man, at all, and he's just making fun with him, and he throws away his hat, and then at the end they got in fight, in which the Siegfried then breaks by the sword the Wotan spear into pieces, and that is the sign to Wotan to disappear. But before this happens, there is also Erda appears. Erda, which is very important. And again, we have this sleeping motif. And then Erda comes there, and she is singing. Sie tells about herself that mein Schlaf ist Träumen, mein Träumen ist Sinnen, mein Sinnen ist Walten des Wissens. So it is mein Schlaf ist Träumen. So my sleep is dreaming. My dreaming is sensing, and my sensing is power of knowledge. Yeah, the river motif. So that is very prophetic of the wisdom Erda represents here. And Erda once again warns Wotan that you have to give, you must not try to reach the ring, that the end of the Valhalla is very close approaching, and that you must know that. Wanderer still wants to hear more prophecies of Erda, but Erda disappears again in the ground, in the earth. But then comes this scene between Siegfried, this fight, and when it is over, we have this rather wonderful orchestral interlude, which brings us there is only I think it is alto violin. It goes very, 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 very high up alone in this. It of course indicates that we are going high. By the way, I've discovered in Sibelius' Fourth Symphony exactly similar passage with the solo violin going very high up, and in the very highest register is reached, then we hear the and we have the mixture of different motifs. So Siegfried arrives there, goes through the magic fire circle, and sees that there is someone is sleeping there, and he tries to guess that who is that figure, and who has also all the Walküre dress, and then he tries to wake, but this person doesn't answer, and then he takes away the panzer, and then suddenly he is surprised. Does it kind man? That is no man. Normally, in this phase, nowadays in the audience burst into laughter. And if he discovers that it's not man, but it is something else, so it's a woman. And then suddenly he feels the fear. He's now scared to meet a woman. And then at the end, he decides that he might try to kiss that, but maybe that kiss might awaken, and we have here. comes this motif. Brynhilde's awakening motif, and orchestration again is something miraculous. This is directly taken by Richard Strauss in his study book for orchestration as a wonderful orchestral color which is Rhine. And then Brynhilde greets the sign Heil dir Sonne. So Heil dir Licht, hail you light, leuchtende glittering day. And then Siegfried and then comes passage with Ernst Kurt in his famous study on Tristan harmony. Takes an example of the major minor oscillations for the color reasons. Brynhilde's greeting high. So this A major, A minor, so it's an example of the very colorful harmony. And then there is a very, very long duet between Brynhilde and Siegfried, in which many of these previous leitmotifs are gone through, but here we have more the impression that the orchestra is now in the main role. Texture is rather complicated already, so it's revealed even if you play, let's say, August Stradal's arrangement of this whole end and it closes, but it has also this very famous, beautiful Siegfried idyll motif. Of which he wrote a separate orchestration for a smaller ensemble as a birthday gift to Cosima. So, and then it ends with this love duet, and they have discovered each other, and so it is the happy end of Siegfried. Then we go further to the last opera of Nibelungen, the Götterdämmerung. And here it starts immediately with this very austere, somber tonality, namely the previous motif, E minor, C major, D minor, is transformed into E flat minor, C flat major. Flat minor. So it's very, very dark, and then we hear. Again, we meet the norms Norns, they are the three ladies who carry who are waving the thread of the world upon which the whole destiny is. And each one of them, they tell their story. Norns are Våglinde, Velgunde, and Flosshilde, they are called. And they tell their story, what happened again in the three previous operas. It's a rather long story. But at the end, something dramatic thing is that this thread of the word is broken. And so that means that the word is close to end. And so they disappear. And then we go from this very dark scene with Nornen, these faithful ladies. We go to once again high up on the rock, on the mountain where we left Siegfried and Brünnhilde. And now we have the very quite wonderful scene, which is the last really happy moment in the whole Götterdämmerung. That's why it is something rather nice. We have we are there. So this is Brünnhilde motif. Notice, by the way, here this baroque feature, Doppelschlag, this decoration. Wagner very much uses it in many of his scenes. And we have it's very long. I want to show you one very rare video document. It is the only film document we have of this very famous German tenor Max Lorenz, who was the greatest star in the 1930s and 40s on German opera stages in Wagner especially. It's very strange that this is the only one we have of this filmed. And this is just a very short climax of this duetto between Brünnhilde and Siegfried at the beginning of Götterdämmerung. It's filmed in Bayreuth, and their camera shows also there is Winifred Wagner, the director of that time, and then Hans Tietjen, the stage conductor, and I think this has been taken in early 1930s, this video fragment. We try to see it. Then after this duet, Siegfried leaves Brünnhilde alone, and that is one of the little illogical moments in the whole story, namely why Siegfried has to leave Brünnhilde. Once they have now reached each other, why don't they live happy now until the end of life together? But Siegfried leaves for new deeds, so to say, and that is a little bit illogical. Now, of course, in many stories happen, like in seafarer Simbad. Simbad is always rescued from dangers in his journeys, gets home and is happy, but then he leaves again for a new journey. Maybe there is some kind of psychological truth of that. Anyway, Siegfried leaves, and then we have he takes journey upon the Rhine River, which is this Siegfried Rhine journey is also much played, and there we have this all these motifs are gone through, which are characteristic of the so it is one of the famous and this journey brings him to the Giebihung court, which is deeper in the Rhine River, and now we meet these worst enemies of the gods, namely Gunther, Gudrun, and Hagen especially, and then also Alberich is there. And they are there, and the problem is that Gunther doesn't have a wife, nor has Gudrun. They are brother and sister. And then Hagen has heard about this Rhinegold and thinks that they must try to get the Rhinegold and the ring to get the power over the gods. And so they see that Siegfried is approaching, and they make a conspiracy against him, and they invite him first very politely to visit their court, but then they give him a potion drink which makes him forget his previous identity, especially Brünnhilde. And when he has forgotten Brünnhilde, he is ready to fall in love with Gudrun. And on the other hand, they get the idea that now Siegfried might go on the rock to see Brünnhilde and take the ring from her, and then bring Brünnhilde back to the Giebihung court to be married with Gunther, so to say. So this is plot, and then it takes place, all this using this Tarnhelm, which makes one invisible. Siegfried is able to come there, and so they get back to the court, and their Brünnhilde is of course quite upset, and when she realizes what happens here, and yes, but and the ring is taken by Siegfried now. But now Siegfried has renounced the love, so the ring has become a curse. So that will make his fate later. And after all, then in the plot we return back on the rock, and there Brünnhilde is alone, waiting for quite innocently waiting for Siegfried. But then instead, one of the Walküres, Waltraute, comes there, quite alarmed about the situation in the Valhalla, where Wotan has lost his power, and the gods are quite helpless, and Waltraute advises Brünnhilde to return back to Valhalla. Brünnhilde, of course, refuses because he has the ring and he believes in Siegfried. But then Siegfried comes, and there's this betrayal. The whole style in music has become quite complicated. There are some new motifs also are still in this late phase are introduced, and the orchestra is heavy. Then in Giebihung court there are there's a marriage, wedding, fest, and Hagen comes with his men, and here we have the choir portraying this barbaric tribal fest, so to say. But then, when Siegfried has left the States, Brünnhilde makes a new oath in which she decides she will revenge Siegfried. Then, in the last act, Siegfried is again in the forest, and he notices in the river 3 Rhine maidens, and they make again a warning that you must give up the ring, otherwise something disastrous will happen. But Siegfried is only laughing at that. Then comes Hagen and his men. They are on hunting trip, and Siegfried joins. And during this hunting trip, Hagen kills by his spear back, pushes in his back his spear, and Siegfried dies. Before Siegfried dies, he tells his life story, like small fragments of his most important leitmotifs, and before he dies. So by dying, he becomes aware again that he is Siegfried and that who is Brünnhilde, and so. Then we come to the closure. In the court, Gudrun is waiting the men from the hunting, and they come, but they are carrying something, and it is Siegfried, her supposed to be husband, who is dead there. And then appears Brünnhilde solemnly with his horse, and tells her farewell, and by a torch he puts the fire on a huge pile of trees, and throws herself in that fire. Yes. But then she throws away the ring to the river. Hagen, who is there, tries to grasp it, but then granddaughters pull Hagen under the waves, so he disappears. And then we are at the end of the whole thing. We had again one long narrative section, those narratives which threaten the unity of the drama, as we know, or Aristotle warned about it. But the difference between Siegfried's last story and Brünnhilde is that Siegfried tells only about his own life, but Brünnhilde tells about the whole fate of the world, so that her consciousness is much broader than I think there is something like some kind of feminism is here, because we know that Wagner also in his last years was very interested in the women movement, and the last lines he wrote as a prose sketch was something like the liberation of the women takes place very slowly and with great difficulties. That is absolutely the last lines he wrote before he passed away. So Brünnhilde gets the main role here, and at the end we have again the orchestra is now in its full vigor, and we get the Rhine daughters are now happy they got their ring. We hear all the motives are now to the, and then we hear this motif of the hope, which comes here just as the last one. flat major the tonality. So this is not quite, if you think it, if we started in E flat major, but we close in D flat major. But anyway, it's major. So like Christian Thielemann said, every Wagner opera ends with the major chord. So there is something positive. So that is a huge drama, one of the greatest artworks created in the European cultural history, and it is open to many, many kinds of different interpretations, and it is still fascinating all the people in the world, in all opera stages and all nations, and we get always something new. But it is very good to know about the origin of everything and how this all came about.